Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about the Ender 5 Plus that we converted to dual extrusion 2-to-1. Now, how we did this, I could find nowhere could I find a pre-made hex file to do this. So I started this project probably 6 months ago. I buy a lot of my parts from China because I'm in no hurry. So we got a lot going on here, different projects we can work on, so we'll just wait. So I had to wait for the motor that I got from China, super cheap, and a Hotend. I bought a super cheap Hotend from China. And I had to get the screen from TH3D. And I also, the thing that took the longest to get was I used the Creality, the 2.2 board, the silent version of that board. I can't remember if it's a 2.1 or a 2.2. And you can't see it, but this is just a plastic piece right here that pops in the back. And then it has this piece with lips right here on each side, which actually snaps into this right here. Reach up, pop it on here. Under there that I couldn't see. So that's snapped in place right there beautifully. Now if you look, this is called the Full Graphic Smart Controller. The ReapWrap discount Full Graphic Smart Controller. These are pretty cheap. You don't have to buy it from TH3D. Just wherever you can get it. Then we made this cover that snaps on too. So none of this uses any hardware. And I mean, I can almost pick up the... I can't quite pick it up with it, but it's on there. So you don't try to lift the printer up. And then this is a cover. We got a little obnoxious with the label, but this does in fact just snap on here. And there you go. And all this is on there pretty good. So, and then a knob, blah blah blah. Alright, so trying to think if anything else, any other problems. Now we'll talk about this Hotend here. So this is the Hotend, and I had a lot of trouble with this Hotend when I first got it. It was actually had mid-range ratings. Half the people liked it, half the people hated it, but it was one of the best rated ones. None of these 2-to-1 seemed to have decent ratings. Also, I wanted something that was kind of compact. It was close to the size of the original one. So when I got this, sometimes when I was feeding it through, I couldn't get the new filament to go down in the throat. So after playing with it a few times, I realized that sometimes if I wiggled this line, it would change the direction down inside there just a tiny bit to allow it to go through into the throat. So what I did is I fabricated this clip, and this just snaps on here. And I think it's good enough. Took 3 versions to get it right. And basically this just snaps on, and you snap that on there, and that keeps them lined up, and that seems to work better. I just put this on like literally like an hour ago, and I haven't done a print with it, but I had one that wasn't quite as good, and it seemed like maybe it helped. I'll get a verdict on that here pretty soon. So straightforward, you need a board, 2.2 board that I put in this thing, the 2.2 silent board. Physically look at the board and make sure it has a chip on it. Look at some of these boards here. Here is the original 2.2 board, non-silent, that comes in the machine, and if you look, there's no chip actually on the board. It has the extra connector right here, E1. It has the connectors for heater 1, and it has sensor 1 on there somewhere, but it did not have the chip. So we got the 2.2 board with the chip, put it on there. So I had problems with the BIOS. I did not have the ability to compile Marlin by myself. I tried. I kept having errors. Seemed to be something related to the this OEM screen on here, and me trying to convert it to the open source screen. Whatever the reason, it dawned on me that TH3D had CRX support in their firmware, and I was like, well, wonder if I could convert that to the Plus. So I noticed also on their CRX that you had to replace the screen, so it had the same. Now the TH3D BIOS has support for the Plus, but not in dual extrusion. And when I selected the Plus and tried to make the adjustments to the BIOS to make it work with the dual extrusion, I didn't have any success. So I was like, alright, so that's 2 strikes. So it dawned on me, why not try to use the actual CRX dual extrusion firmware that they have, because the CRX is a dual extrusion machine, so the TX3D firmware supports that. So I started messing around with that BIOS. I changed the size of the beds. I had to flip it 3 motor directions, I believe. I had to make other little changes that I ran across when I tried to compile, but eventually I got the firmware loaded and everything seemed to be operating correctly. However, it wasn't printing right. I went right off the bat, I went to white and red. So, and I started printing these cones. And this one is one of the decent ones that I printed towards the end. But this is more typical what I was getting right here. And you can see the color change on the top is good. The color change on the bottom is not sharp. Now this is over extruded. If you get a real close up, you're going to see it's a little over extruded. But you see the lines are nice and sharp. The reason why this is over extruded is because I ran into one other little problem I want to mention, and that is I bought another motor from China, a decent one but cheap, and not the exact Creality motor. So when I put this on here, I just felt like I'm trying to, what tipped me off? Something tipped me off that maybe one of the motors wasn't extruding properly. I'm not sure, but I decided to go ahead and check the E-steps for the motors, and I found that the motor 1 was about 5 millimeters short, and I found motor 2 was about 20 millimeters over. So extruding way too much, and now that one that was way over was the new motor. So I went and looked in the BIOS, and I found out you cannot, when you use a 2-to-1, you cannot set your extruder motors independently. So you can't go in there and adjust the steps different for each one. So from that point, I have other Creality printers here, so I grabbed a Creality motor off one of the new 5 we're building and put that on here, and my E-steps were close enough. But during all that, I had boosted everything up to 105%, and that 5% is the over extrusion you see on this right here, and that's what 5% of over extrusion pretty much is going to do. Alright, so moving right along, there's the inside. Very cool. Got some other little things here that I did. So this is a print for our eSun dehydrogenator. Now, everything looks on this good on this, and I even bumped the flow up to 105%, but for some reason on the yellow right here, I got some under extrusion on the S, but that's the only place I have it. Everything else looks freaking perfect. Not sure what's going on with that S right there. Now I got that on the other, I printed another one of these, and the S was also a problem. So we'll dig into that. But everything else looks pretty good. So, alright, so I got the hardware where it seemed right, or where I thought it was right. But when I went to start printing, of course I was using Cura, and I didn't really have a whole lot of idea what I was doing inside of Cura. And that's where I was having the color change problems. And I couldn't understand exactly what Cura was telling this thing to do. It was kind of wanky. The way it was doing its purges when it was doing its purges. I'm not sure I still have a grip on that. But we're going to go over here and look at some of the hardware on the computer. And I'm going to show you some things in Cura, which is probably going to be the most important thing to learn about dual extrusion, is what's going on in Cura. Okay, so everybody pretty much gets the basics of, you incorporate your two files and you select each one and pick a color for it, and then you merge them together. Like, you select all and then merge them together, and then after you merge together you get this right here showing which your two colors are, blah blah blah. Now, when you get into Cura here, put these over here if they would, please. You're going to have settings for each one of your extruders, and we're just going to go over a couple of these right now. Your shell, you don't want any of those overridden, unless you're going to be you're looking for some kind of effect or using different filaments or whatever, and you can dig into them when you might want them or when you might not want those. Keep on scrolling down here. So your infill, you don't want your infill overridden to start out for a basic print. Again, if you're looking for some kind of where you're putting a different kind of filament in the middle versus the outside, that's when you would use that. So temperatures are interesting. There's a whole bunch of temperatures. Now, when I started out, I was using some cheap white that I had, that 3D Salutec cheap white that I like. I was using that. Now that stuff will print at a pretty low temperature. I want to say, I don't remember offhand, but I want to say that'll print around maybe 190. And then I was using eSun PLA plus black, and that stuff likes to print at 208. So I had to find a temperature that they would both print at. And obviously, because you could start under extruding if you get too cool, I noticed that I was at 210, which is actually, I'm screwing around, that probably could be 208. I was guarding against under extrusion, because you saw the little bit of under extrusion and flow issues that maybe I was looking at. Alright, blah blah blah. All my temperatures are going to be the same. Now, no doubt you can have different temperatures for you depending on what filament you're printing, but to start out, I set all my temperatures the same. So I did that. Also down here there's a standby temperature. So that's when your nozzle takes breaks for whatever reason. You don't want your element to start dropping your temperature of your hot end, so I would go ahead and keep that standby temperature right at wherever your printing temperature is. So one thing I also noticed about when you print on the Plus is that since the bed is so big, your print can be hotter. So if you just have a standard profile for like your regular 5 and you use it on your Plus, it might not be any good. So you'll see here on my Plus, I actually dropped my build temperature build plate. So on my 5, this might be 70 and 60. 70 for the first layer, 60 for the build plate normal. I've actually dropped the build plate a little bit here to prevent for excessive temperatures because of the big surface area of the bed blocking any cool air. Also, you'll see I have my fan bumped up about 10% more on the plus than compared to the 5. Moving right along. This is not the important stuff. Bear with me. We'll get to the important stuff. I believe you can tell it you want to use different materials for the support. That's if you use dissolvable supports. Also, another important thing to learn or know is the left extruder is going to be the first extruder in the firmware, and the right one will be your second extruder. So let's see. Build plate adhesion, I generally set that to the first color I'm using, which also your biggest color, the color you're going to use the most of, I believe is what you want to use as your extruder one, your main color. So I set that to whatever extruder is going to print first. Dual extrusion. Alright, so here's where we're going to get into our prime tower. This is like the most important thing, because if you don't have the prime tower set right, Cura will literally freak out on you. So there's two major settings here. You got your prime tower size, which is going to be its diameter, and then you got your prime tower minimum volume, which is going to be exactly how much you're going to spit out when you do your color change. Now, if this number right here is too small, you will run out of prime tower while you're priming, and it'll just move on. I don't know if it goes to the next layer or what, but it acts stupid. It definitely doesn't prime. You'll get these color bleeds on your lines. So the way you want to do this is, after you slice whatever you slice, you're going to need to come here to preview every time. And what you're going to want to do, you know, this is a terrible one to show you this example. Alright, if you look right here in the middle of my prime tower, I don't have a hole. Alright. You should have a hole always there. So let's change this to an 8. And slice it again. That's still no good. Alright, now we have a hole. So you see our hole in the middle? You see there's our hole all the way through. You won't have it on the brim. Sometimes you'll lose the hole on the top, but you see there's leaving a hole there. Now any hole is okay, just as long as there's a hole. So you could possibly go down to 39 right here. And then slice it, preview it, and we still have a hole. So you can go as low as you want, as long as you have that hole. Now 60 millimeters is a that's a good amount for if you're doing a hard color change, like from black to white, red to white, whatever. 60 was good. You probably can go down with that. Couple of settings down here you want to think about. You want to go ahead and just keep your ooze shield. It's not that much more time, but the ooze shield, you'll see it'll have crap stuck all over it that would have been stuck over your print if you didn't have it. So go ahead and keep that. So here's your nozzle retraction distance. Now I think on this nozzle I figured out it was 38 is all I needed, but I have it set for 45. I haven't totally dialed that in yet. Now every now and then when you pull your nozzle, you'll see it'll leave a little hair off it. If you ever take it apart after it's retracted, sometimes you'll see it'll have a little hair that dangled. So you want to try to back up far enough where you don't have that hair sticking down in your throat when the new filament, the other filament comes in. Although it's a possibility that it's coming in with enough force that it would just snap it off. So 45 now, your retraction speeds are important, but this is the important one, the prime speed. So if this is too fast, it's going to try to, the velocity is going to push a little bit extra filament out of the end of the nozzle when it primes. So that's that. Alright, I'm going to take a little break and pull up some of the, at least that hot end that I purchased. So this is the hot end that I purchased for this mod. Now this may or may not work with that new clip. Either way, I got this actual CRX coming from Dot Shop for like 46 bucks, I think is what I paid for it. They had the cheapest price, but I gotta wait for it to come from China. So I recommend getting that. I imagine that one's more refined since there's more at stake. You know, if that one wasn't good, people would be sending expensive printers back to them. So I think that CRX Creality hot end is the way to go. So if I think of any more information that I left out, I will add it, but I think there's a lot in this short video that will save people a ton of time. So good luck everybody and happy printing.